Today's video will talk you through how to build bigger chest, shoulders and arms with a muscle doctor, Dr. Jordan Shallow. Heading over to Benouche Gym. See you in there now.
Yeah. What we do when you knock us down? Yeah. What we do when you knock us down? Life be throwing you heels and you be falling right down. Somebody stealing your fame, yeah, they stealing your crown. Somebody throwing that sword, yeah, they throwing your game. You shooting for that fortune and you feeling that blade. When everything you wanna hear is turning into no's. When you got something in your heart, they never know. You flow with your heart, you flow with your faith, you flow with the love, baby, love for the girl. You can't hold me down.
Guys, exercise one we've done is a cable fly. Doing that more of a warm up. We're going to do more delt work today because John's got a pec issue.
A lot of times, it's like peeling back layers of the onion. It's like if the pec minor is in a certain position, that means the scapula is in a certain position, but likely what's dictating the scapula in that position is actually the rib cage. A lot of times we just look at the rib cage as this like monolithic structure that's just always kind of there, but meanwhile it's probably our most dynamic structure that we have because we're always breathing all day, every day. I do bicep curls 3 times a week, but I take however many reps a minute over however many, like 60 minutes an hour over 24 hours a day when I'm 32 years old. But the idea that the rib cage doesn't have a huge part in the way our upper body mechanics work is like, we're not looking at the rib cage, it's like, what are you paying attention to? All the rest of it is fucking window dressing. So that only became apparent to me because I tore my pec and all of a sudden I was like, whoa, what the fuck is all the rotator cuff shit in the world? If you got a rib cage, it's just like, whoop, you're fucked.
We then went into a prime shoulder press, did one heavier set, one back off set, and now we're going to do an absolute ton of side delts, rear delts, and it's arms.
Think of it like, you played rugby growing up?
Yeah.
Right. Most of your audience British?
American British, yeah.
Okay. American people. Hello. The quarterback throws to where the player is going to be. Think of that with your elbow position on machine. So like Charlie's going to keep his elbows a little bit more forward because you know it's going to continue in this sweeping arc of the machine.
Which if you're back here, you're going to end up coming
Right.
round,
So
aren't you? Yeah.
right. Well, if he pushes his elbows back, that means the force is going this way. But the machine only wants the force to end up over here. So it's like the elbow sort of tells the wrist where it's going to end up, right? It's like the wide receiver tells the quarterback where the ball needs to end up. So you want to set that trajectory from the elbow by having the elbow a little bit forward and just knowing that in order to effectively match the resistance in the machine, you have to match the vector of the machine, right? So force has like a directional component, and that direction is going to start pushing backwards. So the elbow forward allows that vector to start to travel backwards.
Yeah, it's one of the things you see a lot of people when they do like a shoulder press, they end up like rotating through it all the time. They're trying to push, they're trying to push forwards rather than up.
Because on machines, they're likely trying to recruit more pec and driving the elbow back. That's going to recruit more pec for the most part. On dumbbells, you actually see the opposite. Their elbows are way too far behind them, right? So they get out of this neutral plane, which this machine kind of keeps our arm in line with like the curvature of our scapula and our rib cage. So that's the nice part about this machine. It keeps us in this neutral shoulder, as opposed to dumbbells, where everyone's usually back here. I think you did a post on that the other day. So this machine is good for that, but you got to understand like the vectors. What is the direction that the force is applying to you, and how can you work with the machine to get the most amount of force into the muscle that you're trying to target? That was probably a really good rep.
I find for training delts, I really like drop sets. I think they got such a quite poor blood supply. They're just like hammering them with like really quick reps. I've never really liked really heavy pressing.
The delt has such a large active range, right? Like it's 100 of 180 degrees. The delt is the primary mover of the shoulder through abduction. So lateral raise, especially with a drop set, because really what you're doing is like you're manipulating the strength curve of the muscle, right? You can do that by cables, and we'll do that actually in our next exercise, and we'll explain why we move the cable to match how this profile sort of dropped off. But basically, when we start and we're fresh, we're failing up here. But as we finish, we're kind of failing here, right? So it's like, well, I want to maybe add in third exercise where I'm starting to fail in that lower range of like initiating abduction in the shoulder. So it's like, there's so many accessory muscle groups that play a much stronger role in completing a press, right? Like the triceps are gonna obviously play a big role, but with a fixed elbow, it's pretty much all delt, right? And it's one of like the few isolation muscles that really works effectively, because like if you think like a pec, right? Like a pec is going to be difficult to just do pec because bicep and delta are involved. Right? But when you're pulling from here, there's nothing else to pull from. Like it's just delt. So it is probably one of the purest isolation exercises that covers such a substantial range at a joint that has such a potential for range of motion. Like bicep curl, the elbow just does this, but the shoulder does all of this shit. So for us to be able to effectively isolate with minimal assistance of other muscle groups like bicep, like tricep, like pec, is like makes the lateral raise like a very unique exercise in that sense.
So I struggle. I don't know if you noticed this because I know you're watching. My right delt's much more developed than my left delt. Do you notice anything in my movement pattern that I do that's weird or? So this trap, I feel like popping the shoulder. So I'm almost trying to lift pull my traps in a bit to keep my like shoulders more stable.
Yeah.
But then hold that position.
Yeah, the thing is like, it's like the never-ending debate, right? Like, do you isolate or do you integrate? I would say the best way for like symmetrical development is like unilateral movements, like side to side, but not necessarily like, you could argue that this is unilateral in a sense, because it's like free weight on both sides. But we're using a mirror. He's visually auto-correcting to make symmetrical the subjective arc of both of his arms, where it's like if without that reciprocal reference point, if he just does one arm at a time, he's not going to get influence of how the one arm path will be based off the arm path of the other. So one of the questions I get a lot, and like actually get a lot, not like people ask me all the time, but like no one ever asks them, like I actually get this question like 100 times a day. It's how do I balance asymmetrical muscle groups? It's like, do them one arm at a time and do them not facing a mirror, right? So you can, like actually it's gonna sound, it sounds so like old school bodybuilding, but it's like those guys were kind of onto something, right? It is about feel, because like this takes feeling away, right? The mirror is a good tool, but it's a better master, right? So like to fix asymmetries, because you'll find that when you just lift with one dumbbell, try to fix an asymmetry and you don't see it in the mirror, you'll start to realize that maybe that asymmetry is coming from my obliques. Maybe it's coming from like a lack or bias of like rotation at the hip, right? Because you'll start to like reposition yourself in different ways so it feels symmetrical. It doesn't look symmetrical. And that's like the catch-22. It's like, well, you think if it looks symmetrical, the muscles will grow symmetrically. It's like, no, there's no way. Even without any sort of injury, we all have asymmetries in our structure, right? We're not built with this perfect, unless you're like a world-class sprinter, most people have asymmetries left to right. I have a diaphragm here, right? I have a heart here. I have a spleen here. Like we're not symmetrical. So that's the trick. If you're trying to fix symmetrical body parts, don't use the fucking mirror and do one arm at a time, because you'll realize that asymmetry, whether upstream or downstream, has a lot of contributing factors in the case of the shoulder, from like the rib cage, the core, the pelvis, the hip, down into like the knee, foot, and ankle.
Would you do the same thing for chest, for example? You could do like a single arm dumbbell press. Because obviously you need a lot of stability, so that, I don't know if that would be a different, the first thing came to my head. So a lot of people talk about pecs being left and right.
Yeah, okay, if you have asymmetries in pec development left or right, lay on the floor, put the opposite knee flat or foot flat, and then press with the opposite arm. You do like a single arm floor press in what's called like a half crook lying position, and you'll notice like your obliques left or right, you'll have such a hard time stabilizing from one side to the other. That would be the equivalent to the pec. Kicks below the hand is probably a good place to start.
2 clicks below the hand?
Yeah, depending on how many. A little lower? Yeah, that's probably it.
Would you use a cuff on this, or would you use a handle? So why would you use a handle instead of a cuff?
So many things out there. And the thing is, none of it might matter. So like, bypassing your potential limitation of grip strength is going to be necessary for muscles that are always or should always be stronger than your grip. Example, hamstrings. Example, lats. You want to use things that, whether it's straps or cuffs, to train lats or hamstrings. I don't know how the fuck you do for hamstrings. But like if I'm doing RDLs, for example, I'm okay with bypassing my limitations of grip strength, because my hamstrings are going to be stronger than my hands, right? This is
not what this is. But grip and this idea of a radiation principle. If I squeeze hard here, everything that leads to here has to be hard, right? I will never be limited by this extensor group in my ability to grow this, right? It's just not, because I'm not going through active wrist extension. Like I find cuffs, and I pulled it, and this is, I'm sorry, cut all this out of me. But like, so I'm a chiropractor by trade. Now what they used to do when you had like an AC separation, so a lot of like football and rugby players, when you fall hard on the pitch, you can separate this thing called your AC joint. So one thing they would used to do is like, before they x-rayed it, they would have someone hold the weight and be like, well, if the shoulder is separated, you'll actually see more separation if you hold the weight, because it's gonna pull your shoulder down. And then when we x-ray it, we'll be able to see a larger separation between the collarbone and the acromion, like part of your scapula. What ended up happening, like, they could see the separation on someone with no x-ray. They went to x-ray and with the weight in their hand, and they couldn't see the separation. They're like, what the fuck? Because when I gripped something, the weight, as they took the x-ray, my delt actually stabilized my whole shoulder joint. So the separation that was like this is now like this. So my thing is like, well, if we know and we can prove more or less that grip is going to improve stability, and we know stability improves output, if I want a greater stimulus to my delt by improving output, I'm squeezing this thing to dust, right? I don't want, like it's a fucking Christmas ornament hanging off my wrist when I got this fucking limp dick hand going on, because what does that mean upstream? It means I'm not getting that full stability of the shoulder joint, of the AC joint, the glenohumeral joint. I can get this feeling like my delt's doing a ton of work, but especially in an exercise like this, where we're overloading like that lengthened position of the delt. That's where our greatest potential for hypertrophy stimulus is going to come. So I'm going to double down on everything I can do to just drive as much stimulus as possible. So a really long way to say I don't like using cuffs, but squeeze this hard. When you're back like this, your lever is actually starting back here, right? So it's like, if I can be over it, it's all just in like the winding fiber orientation with lines of pull is like half the battle. Like the one frustrating thing you see all the time is like, is this recording? Great, I'm gonna talk a bunch of shit. You remember the old like 1950s movies, like Singing in the Rain? And the guy's like swinging around like the telephone poles and the light posts in the street. The idea that we have a cable and we're just singing in the rain, it's like, what the fuck are you doing? Manipulate the position of this so you keep both feet on the ground so you can create effective counterforce. Right? So it's like, if I want what this does, I'll just drop the cable down, right? If I want to overload, like, or if I want what this would achieve, I'll drop the cable down and I'll overload this part, right? If I want what this would achieve, like the guys that do the sideline laterals here, this does the same thing, right? So like, cables are really good ways to create the most amount of counter force, to really just use your delt as like a conduit for force production, right? So it's like, if I'm here, I have a way weaker base of support into loading this length of delt. I can't even move this. But I have both feet on the ground, I can push against this, it starts to move. Or like, I love any suggestive between the legs shit. Like, what are you, that's half the reason the barbell hip thrust is so popular, is because it's so sexually suggestive. And people's Freudian minds are like, certainly this is a good exercise. Oh, I'm glad you asked. All right, your bicep kind of goes from like here to here and here. So if I'm just like hanging out and let my arms kind of chill at my sides, notice how like my radius is here, and then the one origin point is here and the other origin point is here. The dumbbell's gonna pull straight to the ground. So it's like I have bicep fibers going diagonally, but I have weight that's pulling straight down.
It's like, well, that's kind of a problem because I want the weight that's going straight down to go straight through my muscle, but my muscle is on this outward angle. So what I do is I just go, oh shit, look at that. Gravity is now pulling right through these up and down fibers, right? Because bicep, in a textbook, a bicep will say, okay, it originates from the supraglenoid tubercle and the coracoid process of the scap, and it inserts on like the radial head or radial tuberosity or radial aponeurosis. What does that mean? I don't care if you know that. I care if you know the bicep inserts here and originates here roughly and here roughly. So I just need to put force through that, and me doing this is not a good way because the bicep fibers are going this way, gravity's going this way. Bicep fibers are going this way, gravity's going this way.
This full wrap training with Jordan in terms of how to build bigger shoulders and arms. What's your number one tip for building bigger shoulders, Jordan? You summarize it to one thing.
Oh, dude.
Not 20 minutes.
Understanding your anatomy.
Are you diversifying that anymore?
I can't, but it's going to be a long answer.
In terms of exercise selection towards...
Can I simplify that? I don't know. Your body's complicated, right? Like, how does your cell phone work? Body's infinitely more complicated than that. So,
select exercises that fit your body.
yeah, number one. And not even select, set up. You can make more or less any conventional shoulder exercise fit your body if you know how to set it up. Like presses to a certain degree can be effective. Laterals can be effective. Dumbbells, cables, machines, Smith machine, kettlebells, well, it can be effective if you know how to make them fit your body. So like, I think if I had to summarize like one important piece for you guys to like maybe take away is understand what like the neutral scapular plane is. Now like, it sounds wordy, but trust me, like, it's worth it if you want to get results. So like a lot of people when they do kind of laterals, right? If Charlie turns to the side, they'll do a lateral back here because his arm is parallel, or sorry, it's running parallel with the side of the room. If you look at this room we're in, it's like everything is 90 degrees in a straight line. You go, oh, okay, I want to keep my arm in line with the end of the room. But your arm doesn't care about where you are in the room. The arm cares about where it is in relationship to this curvature of the rib cage of the scapula. So you'll find with pressing, with laterals, you know, we're staying in this neutral shoulder position. And that's really when I say know your anatomy. That's kind of like ground zero for like, especially building delts or even, you know, bicep or tricep in the overhead plane. We're trying to stay in this plane primarily, right? So we're not doing our laterals back here. We're not doing our bicep curls way back here. We're not doing our tricep extension. Everything's trying to stay here. So figure out what angle of the shoulder for your laterals, for your presses, has your arm completely flush with that curvature of the rib cage where your scapula rests on top of. So when I say know your anatomy, that would be like the real big rock to turn over in knowing your anatomy when it comes to shoulder training. That good?
What he said, that was a good answer. So, if you found that tip helpful, comment below, and any other questions you have, make sure you smash the like button, subscribe, turn the notification bell, and we'll see you next video.